Well, after another 10 minutes of toing and froing with the adjustments, the rangefinder is working very well now. It appears to be accurate across the range. Vertical alignment is good, horizontal alignment's good, and that now is done. Of course, it's very hard to work on something like that without managing to shove another fingerprint on there somewhere, and I specialise in getting them on the viewfinder lens at the back, so we'll just get rid of that little fingerprint. Don't want anyone being able to tell that I've done it. Right, that's better. So there you are, nice and sharp. That's a good rangefinder now. We'll just about close up the top of this camera, I think. What do we need to do? Well, the meter, of course, I'll clean that meter window. That's plastic. It's easily scratched. You only need to rub at it with it. Dry cotton buds, you'll scratch it. So you've got to be very cautious about cleaning it. Don't get too ambitious. The less time you spend cleaning that, the safer it will be. Our film release button and its return spring can go on. The shutter release button which of course wouldn't release anything earlier, can go on. That. Before I close this up, I'm going to put a couple of spots of lacquer on that screw holding the gear there. It's not essential, but it would stop that screw from backing out, loosening up, potentially. If I don't smother that with lacquer, I'll just put a couple of spots in those slots. A little bit of extra grease there. Not that much. Put our meter in position. Lower the top cover into place. It's not sitting down into position. Something is holding it up. Get that back up. The shutter release shaft shifted. It has. I'm checking the frame counter here to make sure that it moves one frame and not two frames, and it's relatively accurate. It needs to move forward very slightly. The numbers aren't centering up. This is hard to get the cover off because of the damage on the top cover. It's not serious damage, it's just enough to be annoying. Try my frame counter again. Oh right, well that is quite definitely moving 2 frames instead of 1. So it means that the cocking rack is not in the same position it was once upon a time. That's alright. Just wind that screw in and see what sort of result we get. Getting this seated over the meter is a real trial. It's because the mutilated top cover doesn't want to go over the dial, the adjustment ring here. It's going slightly too far, but at least it's only moving 1 frame now. The wind is howling here today. You often get spring winds. That's good. Right, well I'll put a couple of screws in the top cover. The meter's being held down firmly, I see. And there's a little thread of some dust or something in there I need to see the back of. What's that? That's better. So the screws for the top cover. Well, on the top cover at this end there are 2 screws, chrome plated, countersunk, that screw looks vaguely like a foreigner. That looks like an original. You've got 2 potential screws to use for the casing at this end, because there was a spare because somebody had used the original where it wasn't intended to be used. Doesn't want to go in. Why not? Oh, probably because the top cover is too mutilated. That's better. There's our top cover in place. See about the rewind. A little collar goes on the top. And the rewind knob itself, and you see I'm just casting great shadows here because the window light comes in from the side. There's the spanner, there it is. The wavy washer, that just provides a little bit of controlled friction for the film reminder dial. Sometimes people contact me about the film reminder dial, very worried that they don't know how they need to set it. Of course you don't need to set it to anything because it's only to remind you what film you had in the camera. It plays no part in the settings. That's that. The exposure meter dial. Right, let's get these components in. Now I could tell that somebody had had this to bits before I started by the position of the components here. Potentially, yeah, have we got a full set? Yeah, that looks like a full set. Let me clean these components up. These are comparatively clean, which is a sure sign somebody's been in here, because typically they're not comparatively clean. There's a big piece of chrome missing off that settings dial there. I think I'll go and see if I can find one in my spares that looks prettier. There's a limit to how far I can go chasing cosmetic flaws with cameras. If a camera is uniformly well worn, parts that are uniformly well worn will go well with that camera and won't look out of place. So if I had a camera in that was very well worn and it was missing one particular dial, for example, I would find a dial that matched the general condition of the camera or was slightly better. I wouldn't go out of my way to fit a brand new part. If I had a camera come in that was like new, it was absolutely mint, it was like out of the box, except it had some missing component, I would find the best possible part so that the camera looked complete and everything looked like part of the original camera. Anyway, find a dial. Well, that went very smoothly. I looked in the box of parts and there was a dial straight in front of me of the correct type in a complete and tidy condition, so that can go on here. Or can it? No, it can't. It's not the right type. It's off something else. It's vaguely possible that's off something completely different. So have we got one like this? I have, but that one's got a small scar on it. This one looks okay, a bit dirty. See if it cleans up. Yes, it's by no means perfect. It's a big improvement over that. Let's see if I've got another one. Just about all of these pieces I'm sorting through, of course, are used parts. They have been pillaged from the wreck of some camera that was considered too bad to be repaired. Not necessarily by me. I've inherited a lot of parts from previous repairers. No, we're not getting any further than that. It's one of these ones. on balance, I think it's this one we'll be using. Right. Where are we? We're even in camera. Flaming not. How's that? The wavy washer. The film speed dial. The setting pointer there. There's another wavy washer that goes under the screw. And the chrome screw. Run that screw in. Now, that looks fine. Where's my driver? Let's screw up tight. Now I'll check this on my calibrated light source and see how it behaves. And typically I set this thing up so that it would be correct in hazy sun. Hazy sun. Right, back shortly. Well, the meter is off. There's an interaction between the follower needle, the yellow follower needle, and the white meter needle below it. Now I can't tell immediately whether that's a physical interaction with the follower needle touching the meter needle below, or whether it's something else. But I'll certainly have to find out, so I'm going to have to get the top off, strip the meter out, open the meter up, and find out what's going on. The meter certainly seems to be lively enough. There's certainly good reason to be optimistic that it will be relatively accurate once it's been sorted out. Alright, let's get the meter out and have a look at it. So it's when the white needle, I'm pointing this out the window now, it's fairly bright out there, when the white needle is up near that end of the scale, the yellow follower needle is touching it or influencing it in some fashion. There are two options there. One, the needle is actually touching. I'll have to check to see if that's the case. It could be. They're pretty close, or there may be some other interaction, and there I would be thinking about something, some magnetic problem. Now, if somebody's been into this meter, the screw here is a little bit rough looking. I mean, it could easily be touching that. The follower needle could easily be touching, because we know the top cover here is somewhat out of shape, so the needle could be running lower than it should be. We can get these screws backed out far enough to lift them out. There we have it off. So I'm looking at the meter itself, the movement. Apart from a bit of dust there, which is hardly surprising, that all looks good. The needle is not bent or damaged in any fashion. It appears to be good. So this yellow follower needle here, that's running low. It doesn't appear to be, but then the whole top here could be pushed downwards. There's certainly very little clearance between the needle and the meter case, so there's no room for that needle to come up. I think that this is bent. I think this is bent and it's bringing the whole movement further down than it should be. Alright, I'll have to see if I can work on that to effectively raise this whole piece up. I've taken the dial off so I can look at it from the side, and looking at it from the side it certainly appears to be depressed at this point. In fact, that whole centre piece there is running at an angle downhill. So I've got to pull this point down this way to effectively raise this point up that way. And just achieve that without breaking the plastic window. I'll see how I get on. Well, that certainly sorted out my meter problem. Unfortunately, it's not especially accurate. It certainly is suffering from problems with the selenium cell having lost sensitivity, but it's certain it would probably be okay in sunlight conditions. Of course, if you've got sunlight conditions and know you've got sunlight conditions, you probably don't need a meter. So there you have it. So this leatherette here for the base, that's the next task, is putting this thing back on there. Now it's comparatively clean now. It's a bit grubby looking. That'll clean up later, I believe. I certainly think I can improve the appearance of that. But it's a bit curled. It's a bit curly at the edges. I want to see if I can flatten that out slightly. So I'm going to put this between some damp paper towel and press it lightly with a warm iron and see if I can get this to lay flat. Back shortly. Well, that appeared to work fairly well, so I'm going to glue that leatherette in position now on the base of the camera. So to start with, I'll remove my film advance lever. That film advance lever was showing an effect quite common with these cameras. If the front is closed and you move the film advance lever, the front standard can be pushed too far back into the body by the action of the door, and it can actually jam the cocking rack. That's not a severe example by any means, but it's a good example of why you shouldn't shift the cocking rack while the front of the camera is closed. Right, so here we go. Let's get this adhesive on here. The leatherette's looking much flatter now. I think this will go well. It certainly won't be the lumpy mess it was when we started. Just trying to get an even layer of adhesive on here. It's and making sure I've got cover to the edges. I think that'll do. Bring the camera back into the picture. Get this leatherette in position. I can see the leatherette is a little bit shrunken. It's pulled back from the edges slightly, but otherwise it looks good. So I'll just check, make sure that it's pressed firmly around areas like these, that raised boss around the rewind button, because as it shrinks, of course, it tightens up. And the battery's just about flat, so I'm going to stop right here and change the battery. Well, as you can see, that leatherette is a vast improvement on what we started with. So I'll get my film advance lever back in place. And find the third screw, which I hadn't bothered to fit earlier while we were testing the camera. And we need the back catch cover or tripod surround. It's spring, the one original screw which we found elsewhere in the camera, and I'll have to find another screw. I better do that. Right. The spring's a little bit rough looking. I think I said at the start that it had obviously been mispositioned and was jamming things up. I think that is the case. Let's see if I can straighten it up a bit. That's better. Getting this spring in place is never easy. It's one of those tasks that gets better with practice, but really goes perfectly first time round. Now let's see how we get on. That's it. It went perfectly first time round. So that was the replacement screw I just put in here. Here's one of the original screws, which in this case was elsewhere in the camera, in the focus mount. And that's all good. Just rub off some of that excess adhesive. And we want a leatherette patch for here, since that was missing, and there was just a badly formed one there previously. So I'll have to look through my box of parts. Well, in my parts boxes, my box of used leatherettes, I have a patch here which is by no means perfect, but it's quite good, and it will be more than adequate in this case. So I'll make sure I get plenty of adhesive on here. There's a small cut in this leatherette, which should be invisible once it's all glued down. But it's important that I get a good cover of adhesive on there. And get this in place. The leatherette on the base of the camera is pretty faded. We can get that cut to lie flat. will be in business. That's it. Yeah, it's a good match for the camera. And the leatherette here, it's got a worn look to it, but the pattern's quite clear. It looks good. So the camera body at this stage, that's good to go. But I haven't done the shutter. Better do that.